Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the Games Cage. Today and only today we are here to finally review Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. That's right, I beat it the other day on stream. It was a lit time, and man, I gotta give my thoughts. But there's a lot I want to talk about this game because I feel like there's a lot to it, you know what I mean? And what's really interesting about this game is I think there's a certain reason you're not necessarily seeing that many screenshots or videos of it on Twitter, all this stuff, because there's some stuff that happens in this game. I don't want to get into it because I don't want to get spoilers, but hey, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get right into this fucking review, whatever you want to call it, thoughts, process, and all this shit. So initial thoughts, bro. I fucking love this game. I think this game is really well made. I think you can tell the team at Koei had a blast making it. You can tell they love Breath of the Wild. Then obviously we know Aonuma and the Legend of Zelda team worked closely with Koei so that they can nail the aesthetic, the style, and everything about Breath of the Wild, even from going from the story to gameplay styles, and I'm gonna get to all that stuff. It's like just surface level right there. I'm really happy with how the game turned out as a whole. I really think they paid homage to Breath of the Wild. It's weird, you know, this game almost made me nostalgic for Breath of the Wild, even though it's only 3 years old. And I think that's how powerful just Breath of the Wild is in general, right? The fact that like you go to these locations in Age of Calamity, you're like, oh man, I remember this from Breath of the Wild. Oh, I remember this place and that place. And I was like, damn, bro, I feel like playing Breath of the Wild now. And again, obviously right now there's a lot going on, but if there was nothing else going on right now, I'd definitely jump into Breath of the Wild, because man, it's just like it just felt so good to be back in that style and world of Hyrule. Now let's start with the story, right? Because I feel like obviously going into this, the biggest thing was, oh my god, this is a canon Breath of the Wild prequel. I can't believe it. And you know, in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. Without jumping too much into spoilers, right? In the initial demo of the game, the first thing you see in the game is that little baby egg thing jumping into a portal, and I think right away that kind of sets the idea that maybe this isn't necessarily fully canon, but it is at least in line with how the characters would act and how you would get to know them originally, and how Link would act and Zelda and all these characters would talk and be with each other. And I think that's what I really appreciate, right? I loved obviously different places the story went, just in terms of just, you know, in terms of fun and different aspects there, but for the most part the tone really sticks to Breath of the Wild, right? The kind of the dire feeling of the world ending, almost knowing that Calamity Ganon is coming, and getting to know, you know, Urbosa, Daruk, Revali, and all these characters that we really thought were cool in Breath of the Wild because of the flashbacks, but we didn't really get to know. And even with the Breath of the Wild DLC, where we got to go a bit more into their past, it was just really cool to kind of dive into their characters, how you meet them, what's cool about them, and all that stuff. And I really thought they did a good job with them. Voice acting is really solid, although sound mixing can be a little weird. Like there's a lot of cutscenes where like the music will be like blasting, and then you hear the guys be like, yeah. Breath of the Wild's world's voice acting very odd compared to other Nintendo games, because Nintendo games have had voice acting like Fire Emblem and all this stuff, but there's something weird about the Breath of the Wild, and I don't know what it is. But yeah, no, in terms of just the raw story, I think they did a really great job with what they were able to do. Like I said, I don't want to dive into spoilers. If you know, you know. The way I would say it is, the compromises they made were worth it for a better game, right? And obviously that ties into the gameplay here, right? Look at that segue, but yeah, no, the gameplay of this game obviously is a warrior style game. If you're expecting anything different, if you're expecting dungeon exploring and all that stuff, throw that out the window. This is a pure warriors game from start to finish. Now, for those of you that don't know, warriors games is basically mowing down a fuck ton of enemies, right? Doing special missions where like the side quest will be like certain conditions, like, all right, for this side quest, beat 1,000 enemies. For this side quest, beat a certain boss, and all that stuff. And obviously, because this is in the world of Breath of the Wild, I think those end up being way more fun, right? Because what I liked about this game is, you know, it had a lot of good one-to-one combat, which is really shocking, right? Because you'd go into these levels fighting these bosses, like, you know, like the giant moblins, right? Or like those one-eyed, what the fuck are they called? I've heard their names, like the Hinoxes, right? Those guys, like you would go and fight them, and you could have a good 1v1 fight with them. And just like in the original Breath of the the Wild, they have their weaknesses, right? If you use Link and use the bow and arrow in their eye, like it'll fucking stun them, you could do more damage to them, right? Ultimately, you're trying to destroy the shield of an enemy so that you can get that big damage in, right? And I think every character, they do a really good job of fleshing out their movesets and making them feel really different. So obviously with Link, you're getting the traditional gameplay. You know, his sword, he's doing his crazy spins and his attacks. And what's cool about every character in the game is they have different specials based on the different what are they called, the fucking magic abilities from Breath of the Wild, like the bomb and the fucking magnet and all that stuff. So like if you use Daruk, right, who's much more heavier, he'll have different uses of those weapons. He's also very, you know, he can roll to different areas. You got Mipha, who can swim through places, summon these kind of giant, what's it called, these giant waves that you can dive into, or Bosa using her lightning. And I think they do a good job, just like the original Hyrule Warriors game, where every character feels really different, so the gameplay never feels too stale. You know, there are moments where you're doing a lot of side quests and you're like, okay, I'm kind of brainlessly mashing, but I think switching characters is key in these games. I think the most bored you'll ever get is if you, like, my recommendation is don't overpower one character and just use that power on a character unless you adore them, because I feel like a big part of why you get to enjoy the game is doing different side quests with different characters, because you feel like you're fleshing out their movesets. You feel like you're getting a breath of fresh air, you know what I mean? I don't think this game is not like a fighting game where you could play one character for 100+ hours and you're learning new combos. There are certain combos in the game, but obviously it does boil down to Y, X, triangle, Y, and then Y press triangle. That's not fucking PlayStation, but it's like, yeah, it's like you're doing these different attack combinations. So for the most part, you're doing a lot of button mashy stuff, but again, it's the flashiness of the moves, it's the special moves, it's the cool new moves you unlock. Everything feels satisfying, and switching, like I said, between the characters, and some really cool unlockable characters. Like I said, I don't want to get into it or spoil it for people, but if you know, you know, and if you don't, get ready, because I was really happy and surprised at what they ended up doing with those characters and how there's really cool shit, man. There's a really cool Breath of the Wild type characters that you're like, oh shit, okay. I think my final clock on the game was about 30 something hours, and I could have done way more if you did every side quest in this game. You could probably get 50-60 hours out of the core gameplay in there, right? I don't want to do all of that because I definitely get that feeling of burnout when I do too much of the Warriors thing. Even Hyrule Warriors, the original, which I love, right? There was so much content at some point I'm like, all right, I don't want to fucking get exhausted of this. But again, if you want one game that you could love and have a long time lasting, and again, you'll have a lot of characters to level up, to upgrade, and all that stuff, go for it, bro. I think it's really cool in that way. And what I love the most about the gameplay is just how much it pulls from Breath of the Wild in terms of just like mechanics. Like I said, enemies are weak to certain elements, just like in Breath of the Wild, right? You can parry just like in Breath of the Wild, right? You can fight guardians, and of course, like that feeling of, you know, in Breath of the Wild when you would dread even fighting one guardian, imagine here where you're fighting like 2 to 3 guardians at once, and it's like the most scary thing ever, but it's also the most like satisfying thing ever, because it's these enemies that you were like so fearful of, and now you're just fucking whipping them and destroying their asses left and right, bro. And obviously that can cause some of the frame rate issues the game has. You know, it definitely, I would say the FPS issue is definitely hard to explore. I've seen some people say they haven't seen that. I personally think that's, unless you're playing a different build of the game I've never heard of, that's impossible. You probably just don't notice it as much. But even someone like me who's pretty accepting with lower frame rates as long as the game is fun, definitely notice. I think the worst it gets is when an area is rainy. I almost wish they made these concessions of this. Like, all right, listen, we don't need to make this area rain if it's gonna make it lag more, right? Because like when you go to the desert area, there's not much lag. When you're in an open field, there's not much lag. It's when you're in like the places with like condensed areas with a lot of shit going on visually in terms of like the skybox and all this stuff where it gets really muffled there. But for the most part, really well done. I think for them, like they ended up fixing it way better than the demo. The demo's FPS was really bad. That I just burped while I was talking. It doesn't matter. It was really bad in there, but I think for the most part it plays well. It does a good job, like I said, of blending the Breath of the Wild gameplay with kind of Musou style and a feeling of like, oh, I'm applying things I know in Breath of the Wild to this game, which is really satisfying. It's kind of like a reward. This isn't one of those prequels where I could say go play this before you play Breath of the Wild, because it definitely relies on you knowing Breath of the Wild stuff to get into that prequel. It's not like something like Yakuza 0 where they built it for people to start from. So yeah, that's kind of my stance on that. One major issue I have with the game, and this is like, I don't know, I haven't seen too many people talk about this, but I find the map in this game is so ass. Like, to be frankly honest with you, like the map where you're selecting your missions, upgrading your characters, also, I think it is so convoluted. I think it's unintuitive. I don't think it's fun. Now, let me explain to you why, right? So you go on this map, right? Cool idea, right? You're taking the Breath of the Wild map and you're trying to do something cool with it. But it's like you want to, for example, upgrade a character's move. First of all, you have to scroll to find their icon on the map. Second of all, you're not even sure which move it is until you hover on it. So you'd have to hover on the multiple icons of that character. Then if you're on the icon, right, it'll show you what required items and stuff you need to get that upgrade. Fine, all right, so you're missing a few of those things. You have to go to a shop to find which item you need. And now in this game, there isn't one shop, there's like 10 different shops. So you have to go scroll through all the 10 shops. Let's say you scroll through all the shops and then find the items you need, right? Then it takes you away from when the icon you were at is. So then you have to scroll back to the icon. And obviously this map has a million icons, so it's like, which fucking little icon was it? Was it down here, down there? And then you get the upgrade. It's like, to me, doing that for multiple things sometimes genuinely actively made me want to go, I don't want to upgrade right now. It's too much of a hassle. And I think that's kind of an issue in a game that is very, you know, menu driven in terms of obviously a lot of menu management of upgrading moves, upgrading attacks. I just think it's not intuitive. I wish there was almost like a button where if you hover on that certain upgrade, it'll say like auto buy all items needed, and it'll do that for you. That way you can have everything you need instead of constantly hovering back and forth on that little map. Again, cool in idea, but not practical. I wish there was almost just a list setting for every character. All right, here's this character's thing, upgrade this from here, upgrade this from there, instead of always having to scroll through this weird fucking menu shit. I wasn't really a fan of it, to be frankly honest with you. Now granted, the map is the least of the problems when it comes to a Musou game, and I thought, again, like I said, when it comes to the core mission structure, they did a way better job in this game than Hyrule Warriors. In Hyrule Warriors, the original, I remember losing main missions constantly, bro. Like, and the checkpoints were really bad. It's like just losing a mission in that game felt not satisfying. They had those annoying missions like, you know, like bring this bomb to the other side of the map and it would blow up really easily, and all this, like all these like really annoying hassly missions, whereas here it is way more streamlined. Like, hey, go here, fight this, protect this character, don't worry, they have a shit ton of health, so you're most likely not gonna die. It's like they really make sure that because they want you to be engrossed in the story and what's going on, that they don't make the missions too hard. Now again, that doesn't mean they're not challenging. There's a lot of times in this game where you, again, like I said in Breath of the Wild, you have to think about your moves. You can't just mash your way out of a boss fight, right? You gotta dodge at the right time to get that perfect flurry attack you can get, or again, parrying or using certain moves. Like, there's fucking Lionels in this game, and they are just as scary and terrifying as Breath of the Wild. So I really appreciate that about the game, how it really took that challenge of Breath of the Wild and applied it to a game that is inherently usually really easy because you're just button mashing. But yeah, overall, when I really think about my thoughts on this game, again, I loved it, man. I think, like I said, they did an awesome job. There's really cool characters. Mission structure is really cool. The final act of the game is fucking crazy. And while, you know, I'm not necessarily a fan of how they handled certain things, or some of the things are a little questionable in terms of marketing, I would say in terms of a game, it led to a better game. I'm not really happy about the FPS issues or some of the map problems of the game that are counterintuitive, but for the most part, I think it is a really well made, high quality game, and I think it was worth it. You know, I think in the long run, like I said, I wouldn't say you need to go out and buy this game, but I would say if you love Breath of the Wild at all, this game is definitely worth a shot at some point, right? Whether it's full price now or $40 later or some shit, I definitely think you should put on your radar, because I think it's a really well made, well done game, and I was really happy with it, man. I think the team at Koei did a good job. I want to see them do more of this, and I hope there's DLC. It seems like there's been some data mines and shit, and yeah, I can't wait to go into more like spoiler territory and talk for this game at some point, because I feel like there's a lot of cool stuff to dive into, because it leads to some really sick story modes. So guys, that's it. That's all. Those are my thoughts on Age of Calamity Hyrule Warriors. If you played it, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Try to keep it spoiler free, and of course, subscribe for more, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out. I love you.